At 90 years old, Pastor Jimmy Swaggart's journey came to a peaceful end, but the emotional tribute at his funeral left an unforgettable mark on everyone present. Friends, family, and countless followers gathered to celebrate the life of a man whose words, music, and unwavering faith touched millions around the world. What began as a solemn farewell quickly transformed into a powerful, heartfelt remembrance that moved the entire audience to tears. As stories of redemption, love, and resilience filled the room, it became clear that Jimmy's impact would continue far beyond his lifetime. His funeral was not just a goodbye, it was a celebration of a life dedicated to hope, forgiveness, and the enduring power of faith. Humble beginnings in Louisiana. Jimmy Swaggart was born on March 15, 1935, in Faraday, Louisiana, a small town nestled in the heart of the rural South. Faraday was the kind of place where time seemed to move more slowly, and life revolved around simple joys. Family gatherings, Sunday church services, and the comforting rhythms of close-knit community life. The town was surrounded by wide stretches of farmland, dotted with small churches whose steeples rose modestly against the sky. It was here, amid the sound of gospel hymns drifting through open windows and the chatter of neighbors greeting one another by name, that Jimmy's story began. From an early age, those around Jimmy noticed something different about him. His family often recalled how his eyes would sparkle with a quiet intensity, reflecting a curiosity far beyond his years. But it wasn't just his bright eyes, it was the way his heart seemed to beat with purpose, as if carrying a silent message only he could hear. Even as a child, Jimmy carried a sense of destiny, an inner voice that whispered to him in moments of stillness. He later described this as the calling, a profound and unshakable feeling that his life was meant for something greater. This calling was not a fleeting idea or a passing fancy, it was a deeply rooted conviction. Though he was too young to fully understand it at first, Jimmy knew the feeling was real. It was like a small flame inside, quietly burning, growing brighter with each passing year. This inner light would guide him through the years ahead, through victories, challenges, and moments of self-reflection. A voice that moved hearts. Jimmy Swaggart was never content with merely preaching words about God. He wanted his listeners to feel the truth behind those words, to experience the hope, love, and forgiveness he spoke of in their very souls. Unlike many preachers of his generation, whose sermons often felt distant or rigid, Jimmy's delivery was alive with passion and sincerity. His voice was not cold or commanding, it was warm, tender, and filled with genuine emotion. Listeners described his preaching as something that touched them deeply. It was as if Jimmy spoke not to a crowd of thousands, but to each person individually, directly into their struggles, fears, and hopes. This unique ability to connect on such a personal level made his sermons magnetic. People returned week after week, not just for religious instruction, but for the comfort and healing they found in his words. At the core of Jimmy's message was a simple but powerful truth: no one is too broken to be forgiven. No life is beyond redemption. This message resonated especially with those burdened by guilt, pain, or loss. Jimmy's sermons offered a lifeline, a reminder that everyone, no matter their past, could be made new again through grace and faith. Music, a bridge to the soul. While Jimmy was a gifted preacher, his talents extended beyond the spoken word. Music was a language he spoke fluently, and it became a vital part of how he shared his faith. From a young age, Jimmy taught himself to play the piano by ear, developing a skill and style uniquely his own. His fingers moved across the keys with a passion that made his performances unforgettable. For Jimmy, music was more than entertainment, it was a spiritual expression, a bridge between the heart and the divine. His gospel songs carried the same messages of hope and healing as his sermons, but in a way that could reach people on an even deeper emotional level. Those who listened found solace in his melodies and lyrics, especially during times of sorrow or struggle. Millions around the world were touched by Jimmy's music. His albums sold widely, and his concerts attracted enthusiastic crowds who came to experience not just a show, but a shared moment of worship and connection. His warm, soulful voice became a beacon to those seeking peace, lifting heavy hearts even if only for a few precious moments. The rise of a televangelist. The 1980s marked a transformational chapter in Jimmy Swaggart's life. The growing phenomenon of televangelism, a new way for preachers to broadcast their message directly into homes via television, offered an unprecedented platform. Jimmy seized this opportunity, quickly rising to become one of America's most recognizable televangelists. At a time when many churches were struggling to reach younger and more distant audiences, Jimmy's televised ministry broke new ground. His broadcasts reached millions of viewers across the United States and beyond, creating a global audience hungry for his messages of faith and redemption. His weekly programs combined preaching, music, and heartfelt prayer, creating a powerful spiritual experience in living rooms everywhere. What set Jimmy apart was not just the scale of his audience, but the intimacy he created. On camera, he wasn't a distant celebrity or impersonal figure, he seemed to speak directly to each viewer, as if sitting beside them and listening to their personal struggles. His warm smile, emotional sincerity, and compassionate words made millions feel personally seen and cared for. The heavy burden of fame. Yet, with the incredible rise in fame came immense pressure that few could fully comprehend from the outside. When millions of people look to you for spiritual guidance, the weight of expectation is enormous. Every sermon, every gesture, every public appearance is scrutinized. Perfection, or at least the illusion of it, becomes a relentless demand. Behind the confident smile and strong voice Jimmy projected, he was still human, vulnerable to exhaustion, loneliness, and moments of doubt. The scale of his ministry required relentless dedication, emotional stamina, and unshakable focus. The long hours, the constant travel, and the public spotlight could wear down even the strongest spirit. Despite these challenges, Jimmy remained steadfast. His commitment to his calling never wavered. For him, this journey was never about personal fame or wealth, it was about offering a pathway to hope, healing, and connection with God. He understood deeply that his role was to be a servant, a conduit for something far greater than himself. The fall, a painful chapter. Yet, no life story is without its valleys. In the late 1980s, a scandal emerged that would forever change the trajectory of Jimmy Swaggart's ministry. Reports surfaced about moral failings in his personal life, news that spread quickly and rocked the faith community that had supported him for years. For his followers, the revelation was heartbreaking. Many had placed Jimmy on a pedestal, seeing him as a symbol of righteousness and unwavering faith. To learn that he had made serious personal mistakes was deeply painful. It felt, to some, as though the foundation of their spiritual world had cracked. For Jimmy, this was perhaps the darkest chapter of his life. The shame, the public scrutiny, and the loss of trust were devastating. His family suffered alongside him. Friends distanced themselves. His television ministry faced massive fallout, and many stations dropped his programming. It would have been easy, perhaps expected, for Jimmy to retreat, to hide, to walk away from the public eye altogether. But he didn't. A public confession, the power of honesty. What happened next in Jimmy Swaggart's life would become one of the most defining and unforgettable moments of his ministry. In a time when many public figures chose silence, deflection, or denial when faced with scandal, Jimmy made a different, far more courageous choice. He stepped into the harsh glare of the public eye and laid his soul bare. On a live television broadcast watched by millions, Jimmy Swaggart delivered a raw, tearful confession that stunned his congregation and viewers around the world. His voice trembled, his shoulders shook, and his tears fell freely. There was no script, no carefully managed statement, no attempt to soften the blow. Instead, what people saw was the man behind the preacher. Deeply broken, painfully honest, and desperately seeking grace. With visible anguish, he admitted his failures, not just to God but to the very people who had put their trust in him, who had found hope and comfort in his words for years. He stood before them, stripped of his public image, and asked for forgiveness. His apology was not wrapped in religious platitudes. It was raw, vulnerable, and deeply human. In that moment, Jimmy Swaggart became more than just a televangelist, he became a living embodiment of the gospel he had preached for decades, a man who had fallen but still believed in the power of redemption. Redemption and resilience. The aftermath of the scandal was harsh and unforgiving. Jimmy Swaggart's once mighty ministry was shaken to its core. He lost a significant portion of his followers. Financial support dwindled. His television presence, once a fixture in millions of homes, rapidly diminished. For many, it seemed his influence was gone forever, a once towering figure now brought low, but Jimmy did not vanish. Even as the crowds thinned and the lights dimmed, he continued. He kept preaching, though now to smaller congregations in more intimate church settings. His large-scale television empire may have faded, but his voice remained. He returned to the foundation of his faith, focusing on simple, heartfelt worship, without the grandeur that once surrounded him. Some supporters left, unable to reconcile their faith with his very public fall. But many others stayed. They believed that Jimmy's life, with its failures and recoveries, now carried even more weight. To them, he was no longer just a preacher of redemption, he was a man who had lived it. His struggle and resilience made his message more real, more powerful, his music continued to resonate, offering comfort to those who were themselves navigating dark valleys. Jimmy's story was no longer about perfection, it was about perseverance. He kept moving forward, even when the applause was faint and the road was steep. His story became a testimony to the human capacity to rise again, to face loss and shame without surrendering to them. The unyielding journey, faith beyond the fall. There were many who believed that Jimmy Swaggart's story would end with his public scandal. Some thought he would retreat, defeated by disgrace. But Jimmy surprised them all, rather than disappearing into silence or withdrawing from ministry, he chose to keep going. His life's mission, to share the transformative power of faith and forgiveness, remained unchanged. If anything, his message gained new depth. No longer did he speak as a man untouched by failure, but as one who had fallen hard and risen with scars. He continued to preach, to sing, to reach out to anyone willing to listen. His mission became deeply personal, to remind the world that forgiveness is not reserved for the spotless. It is for the weary, the broken, the ones who know they need it the most. For Jimmy, forgiveness was no longer just theology. It was daily survival. It was the breath that kept him alive. It became his life's practice. He lived the very gospel he preached, demonstrating that even in life's most unbearable moments, forgiveness could heal, restore, and open doors to new beginnings. A family's unwavering support, the anchor in the storm. Through every storm, Jimmy's greatest source of strength came not from public approval, but from his family. Behind the stages, behind the television cameras, was a home filled with quiet, steady love. His wife, Frances Swaggart, was his constant. She stood by him in the best of times and the darkest hours. She was not just his wife, she was his anchor. Frances offered him more than support, she offered him a reason to keep going when the rest of the world seemed ready to let him go. Their bond was tested but never broken. In interviews, Frances would later speak of those painful years with grace and honesty, revealing the depth of their mutual faith and the power of unconditional love. Their children, too, remained close. Public opinion was loud, but the love within his family was louder. They did not walk away. They knew the man beyond the headlines, and they believed in his heart. This unshakable support became a refuge for Jimmy, a sanctuary where he could find rest and renewal amid the world's judgment. The quiet ministry, impact beyond the spotlight. The days of sold-out arenas and global television broadcasts faded, but Jimmy Swaggart's ministry did not die, it simply changed that he embraced a quieter ministry, one that was deeply personal and often profoundly moving. Gone were the grand productions and towering stages. In their place were smaller churches, intimate gatherings, and heartfelt worship services. The spotlight was gone, but Jimmy found something else, authenticity without the pressure of performance. In this quieter season, his sermons carried new weight. There was no longer any distance between the preacher and his people. He was among them, speaking to their heartbreak, sharing his own. His music remained a cornerstone of his ministry. Those familiar gospel hymns, played with the same passion and tenderness as in his younger days, continued to soothe aching hearts. For many who still listened, his songs were like soft lanterns in dark places, a reminder that no one walks alone. Lessons in forgiveness, more than a message. Jimmy Swaggart's life after his public fall became a living lesson in forgiveness, a reminder that life's greatest measure is not whether we stumble, but how we rise after the fall. His story powerfully demonstrates that faith is not a destination reserved for the flawless, it is a journey made meaningful by perseverance, humility, and grace. When Jimmy faltered, when the weight of his own humanity became too visible for the world to ignore, he chose the harder path. He did not run. He did not retreat into bitterness or self-pity. Instead, he made the brave decision to seek forgiveness, not just from God, but from his family, his congregation, and the millions who had placed their trust in him. In doing so, Jimmy Swaggart taught us that forgiveness is not simply an act we extend to others. It is a gift we must learn to give ourselves. His life after the scandal was not about reclaiming fame or rebuilding a fallen empire. It was about demonstrating, day by day, the healing power of grace. His story became a living testimony that no failure is final, no mistake too great to overcome, and no heart too broken to heal. Forgiveness, Jimmy believed, was a key that could unlock peace, a freedom from the crushing weight of guilt and regret. It was the cornerstone of his message and the foundation of his renewed life. Even when his public influence diminished and the grand stage grew quieter, Jimmy's life continued to inspire. His story reminded others that they, too, could choose courage in the face of failure, that they could keep believing in goodness, keep striving for better, and keep moving forward with hope in their hearts. A peaceful passing, the end of a faithful journey. On July 1st, at the age of 90, Jimmy Swaggart's remarkable journey came to a peaceful end. His passing marked not just the conclusion of his life, but the completion of a story that had touched millions. The man who had preached about redemption, sung songs of faith, and walked a difficult road of public reckoning, now left behind a legacy that would echo far beyond his final breath. News of his passing spread quickly across the world. Messages of sympathy and gratitude poured in from every corner, from former followers, fellow ministers, and people whose lives had been deeply shaped by his sermons and music. Many remembered the comfort his voice had provided during their darkest moments, the hope his words had rekindled when their own seemed to falter. Though his physical voice fell silent that day, the message Jimmy Swaggart had championed continued to resound. His lessons about faith, about the liberating power of forgiveness, and about the courage to keep going despite life's most painful setbacks would live on, carried forward by the people he had inspired. The human behind the message, remembering the man. In the quiet days following his death, many paused to remember Jimmy not just as a figure on a television screen or as a name attached to a worldwide ministry, but as a man, flawed, yes, but deeply human. He was not a saint or a symbol of perfection. He was a father, a husband, a musician, a preacher, and above all, a seeker of grace. His story serves as a reminder that every human journey is filled with complexities, with moments of strength and of weakness. His life encourages us to be kind, to ourselves and to each other. It urges us to understand that mistakes are part of being human, but they do not have to define us. What defines us is what we choose to do next. Jimmy's journey teaches us that we are never truly alone, even when life feels unbearably hard. His story speaks to the enduring presence of love, the transformative power of forgiveness, and the importance of holding on to hope, even in our most fragile moments. A legacy of hope, faith, and love. Jimmy Swaggart's life was much like a winding river, filled with sharp bends, calm stretches, and turbulent rapids. Yet through every twist and turn, his message remained clear: love, faith, and forgiveness are the most powerful forces in life. They can change hearts, rebuild trust, and lead us toward peace. That he taught that falling down is not the end, it is an opportunity to rise again. Mistakes are not the measure of our worth. What matters is our response, to keep reaching for grace, to keep walking toward the light, to keep trying to be better. Though his grand sermons and televised crusades have passed into history, the impact of his music, his words, and his life's lessons continue to shape the hearts of those who still listen. His songs still bring comfort, his sermons still offer wisdom, and his story still whispers gently that redemption is always within reach. Jimmy Swaggart's legacy is not merely a collection of televised moments or best-selling albums, it is a living testament to the power of faith and the human capacity for resilience.